I sat motionless in my wheelchair as my brother Daniel slid the property deed across the mahogany table. "Just sign here, Becca. It's for the best," he said, not meeting my eyes. My sister Jennifer nodded encouragingly from across the room, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her coffee mug. The family attorney shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." "You need specialized care," Jennifer added. "The lake house and downtown properties will cover those expenses once we liquidate them." I looked down at the papers, my hand trembling slightly, not from my illness as they assumed, but from a quiet rage building inside me. I signed my name with deliberate care, then raised my eyes to meet their relieved expressions. "I'm just glad you're both taking care of everything," I said softly. "I suppose I should rest now." As my brother wheeled me from the conference room, I caught my Uncle Edward's satisfied smirk reflected in the glass door. What my family didn't know was that 3 months earlier, I had visited a different attorney, and the real estate empire I'd built over 20 years was secured by documentation they couldn't imagine. When I was wheeled back to my room, I pulled out my phone and typed a simple message. "It's time." My name is Rebecca Wilson. Most people call me Becca, though lately, it seems they also call me poor thing when they think I can't hear them. 6 months ago, I was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome after returning from a business trip to Singapore. What started as tingling in my fingertips quickly progressed until I could barely move my legs. The doctors were optimistic about my chances for recovery, but they couldn't give me a timeline. It could be months. It could be years. Before my diagnosis, I was the founder and CEO of Horizon Properties, a real estate development company I built from nothing after dropping out of college at 19. I started by flipping a small condo with a high-interest loan and a lot of sweat equity. 23 years later, my portfolio included some of the most valuable commercial and residential properties in Seattle and Portland. My brother Daniel worked for me as the company's CFO, a position I'd given him 8 years ago when his own business ventures failed. My sister Jennifer, an interior designer, had contracts with all my development projects. My Uncle Edward sat on the board, more as a courtesy to my late father than due to any particular business acumen. We were a business family, but we were still family, or so I thought. The early days of my illness were a blur of hospital rooms, specialists, and fear. I remember the fluorescent lights of the ICU, the constant beeping of monitors, the cold touch of medical instruments. But most vividly, I remember the conversations that happened around me, as if I wasn't there, as if I had already faded away. "How long can she last like this?" I heard Daniel ask a nurse one evening, thinking I was asleep. "Many patients make a full recovery," the nurse replied, her voice professional but warm. "But what are we talking about here? Months? Years?" "Every case is different," she said. "The important thing is that Ms. Wilson has excellent care and support." I kept my eyes closed, but my mind was racing. There was something in my brother's tone that bothered me, an impatience that seemed out of place for someone concerned about a sister's health. When I was finally stable enough to leave the hospital, the question of where I would recover became the subject of family debate. I owned 3 homes: my downtown Seattle condo, a lakefront property on Lake Washington, and a small cabin in the Cascade Mountains where I went to think and write. "The lake house makes the most sense," Jennifer insisted during a family meeting. "In my hospital room. It's all on one level, and we can convert the sunroom into a physical therapy space." My Uncle Edward nodded in agreement. "And Daniel can manage the company operations from there. It's only 40 minutes from downtown." I noticed they didn't ask what I wanted, but at that point I was too exhausted to argue. The lake house was beautiful, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water and mountains beyond. If I had to be confined somewhere, it might as well be with that view. The first month of my recovery was actually pleasant. A nurse named Maya came daily to help with my exercises and personal care. The physical therapist, Chris, visited 3 times a week. Jennifer had indeed transformed the sunroom into a well-equipped therapy space, and Daniel had set up a small office in the guest room to keep the business running smoothly. It was during the second month that I began noticing changes. Daniel's meetings in the house became more frequent and more secretive. I would catch snippets of conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered a room. Jennifer started bringing in contractors to measure and evaluate different areas of the property. "Just looking at some updates we could make," she explained, vaguely when I questioned her. "Nothing for you to worry about." One evening, I wheeled myself into the kitchen for a glass of water and overheard Daniel and Jennifer talking on the deck outside. "The downtown properties are the most liquid," Daniel was saying. "We could have those converted to cash within 60 days. "What about the mountain property?" Jennifer asked. "Harder to sell quickly, but Edward knows someone interested in developing that whole area into vacation rentals." "And the lake house?" "That's the crown jewel. Once it's in our names, we have options." I backed my wheelchair away silently, my heart pounding. Were they planning to sell my properties? And what did he mean by, "once it's in our names"? The next morning, I called my assistant from before my illness, Rachel, who had been placed on temporary leave by Daniel shortly after I got sick. "Becca, I've been trying to reach you for weeks," she exclaimed when she heard my voice. "What do you mean? I haven't received any messages." There was a pause. "That's concerning. I've been calling the lake house and emailing you. Daniel told me you were too sick to talk to anyone." A chill ran down my spine. "Rachel, I need you to do something for me, but it has to stay between us." "Anything," she replied without hesitation. "I need you to find me a lawyer, not our corporate attorney. Someone new, someone excellent, and someone discreet." 2 days later, while Daniel was at the office and Jennifer was at a design consultation, Rachel arranged for an attorney named Laura Chen to visit me at the lake house. Laura specialized in estate planning and financial protection. She arrived under the guise of being a new physical therapist, complete with a fake business card and exercise equipment. Once we were alone, I explained my suspicions. "I believe my family is planning to take control of my assets while I'm ill," I told her. "I need to protect myself." Laura didn't seem surprised. "Unfortunately, this happens more often than you might think. What's your current estate planning situation?" I explained that I had a standard will dividing my assets among family members, with Daniel as executor. The company bylaws gave him temporary operational control during my incapacity, but ownership remained with me. "That's a start, but we need to create more robust protections," Laura said. "Have you noticed any financial documents being brought for your signature? Any suggestions of transferring properties or changing ownership structures?" "Not yet," I admitted, but I overheard them discussing selling my properties once they're in their names. Laura nodded grimly. "They'll likely present it as necessary for your medical care. We need to act quickly before they make their move." Over the next 3 weeks, with Rachel's help and Maya's cooperation, Laura and I created a comprehensive plan. We established a new trust with Rachel and a bank executive as trustees. I transferred my most valuable assets into the trust, with specific provisions about their management during my illness and potential recovery. Most importantly, I created a second secret will that would only be revealed under specific circumstances, if my family attempted to take control of my assets against my wishes. We worked carefully, meeting while my family was away, communicating through a prepaid phone Maya smuggled in for me. Laura brought documents disguised inside physical therapy equipment boxes, and I signed them between actual therapy sessions. Throughout this process, my physical condition was slowly improving. I could stand for short periods, though I still used the wheelchair most of the time. I kept this improvement largely to myself, allowing my family to believe I was more dependent than I actually was. Their plan came into focus gradually. First, Daniel suggested consolidating my bank accounts for easier management of medical expenses. Then Jennifer mentioned that her husband Gregory, a real estate agent, could help evaluate the properties for potential healthcare funding. My uncle Edward was the most transparent. During a Sunday dinner at the lake house, after too many glasses of wine, he gestured around the room and said, "You know, Becca, you really shouldn't worry about all this. The family will make sure everything is taken care of." "What exactly will be taken care of?" I asked innocently. "Everything," he replied with a wave of his hand. "The business, the properties. You just focus on getting better if you can." If I can. Those 3 words confirmed what I had suspected. They weren't planning for my recovery. They were planning for my continued incapacity or worse. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The following week, Daniel arranged a meeting with the family attorney at the lake house. Jennifer and Edward were also present, along with Gregory, who had never shown much interest in family matters before. "We've been consulting with your doctors," Daniel began. Though I knew this was a lie, my primary physician had mentioned no such consultations during my private appointments. "They believe your condition requires more specialized long-term care than we can provide here." "A private care facility?" I asked, trying to sound concerned rather than suspicious. "The best in the state," Jennifer jumped in. "But it's expensive. Becca, really expensive." "Fortunately," Daniel continued, "we have a solution. By liquidating some of your property holdings, we can create a fund to ensure you have the best care possible for as long as needed." The family attorney, a man named Thomas who had worked with us for years, slid a folder across the table. "We've prepared the necessary documents to transfer your properties to a family management trust. Daniel, Jennifer, and Edward would serve as trustees, making decisions in your best interest." I leafed through the papers slowly, recognizing them for what they were, a complete appropriation of everything I had built. Under the guise of providing for my care, they would gain control of all my assets. "This seems very comprehensive," I said quietly. "Could I have some time to review everything?" "Of course," Daniel said, though he looked disappointed. "But the care facility has limited openings, and we'd need to move quickly to secure your spot." "I understand. Give me until tomorrow?" They agreed reluctantly and left me alone with the documents. As soon as they were gone, I texted Laura on my secret phone. They made their move. Properties, company, everything. Her response was immediate. "Proceed as planned. I'll be ready tomorrow." That night, I barely slept. Not from fear, but from anticipation. The next morning, I asked Daniel to reassemble everyone at 2 p.m. "I've made my decision," I told him. In the hours before the meeting, I had Maya help me dress in business attire for the first time in months, tailored pants that concealed the braces on my legs, a silk blouse, and a blazer that hung a bit loose on my now thinner frame. I applied makeup carefully, covering the pallor of illness. I wanted to look like the Becca they knew before, the CEO who had built an empire. When they arrived, I asked to hold the meeting in the dining room rather than my adapted sunroom. I wheeled myself to the head of the table, my table, in my house, and smiled at their surprised expressions upon seeing me looking so professional. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "I've reviewed the documents and I'm ready to sign." Daniel couldn't hide his relief. Jennifer and Gregory exchanged quick glances. Uncle Edward actually rubbed his hands together. The family attorney placed the final transfer documents in front of me. I picked up my pen and signed my name with deliberate care, then raised my eyes to meet their relieved expressions. "I'm just glad you're both taking care of everything," I said softly. "I suppose I should rest now." As Daniel moved to wheel me from the conference room, I caught my Uncle Edward's satisfied smirk reflected in the glass door. The moment had almost arrived. "Actually," I said, raising a hand to stop Daniel, "before we finish, there's someone else who should join us." I pulled out my phone and sent a text. Moments later, the doorbell rang. Jennifer went to answer it, returning with a confused expression followed by Laura Chen and a notary public. "Everyone, this is Laura Chen, my personal attorney," I announced. "Laura, would you please share the documents we prepared?" The room went completely still. Daniel's face drained of color. "What is this, Becca? What documents?" Laura opened her briefcase and removed a sealed portfolio. "Ms. Wilson came to me 3 months ago with concerns about her assets and business interests. At her direction, we created a comprehensive estate plan that supersedes all previous arrangements." She handed copies to everyone at the table, including the family attorney, whose eyebrows rose higher with each page he read. "This is absurd," Daniel spluttered. "She's not well enough to make these decisions. Her illness affects her judgment." "Actually," I said, pushing myself up from the wheelchair to stand on my own, wobbling slightly but remaining upright, "my doctors have documented that my cognitive functions are completely unimpaired, and my physical condition is improving. As you can see." Gasps echoed around the table as I took one step, then another. "You can walk?" Jennifer whispered. "Increasingly well," I replied, "though I didn't share all my progress with you, just as you didn't share all your plans with me." I nodded to Laura, who continued, "The documents you're holding contain several key provisions. First, Ms. Wilson's properties remain solely in her name, managed through a trust with independent trustees. Second, Horizon Properties will be temporarily led by a management team selected by Ms. Wilson, not family members. Third, there is a detailed accounting of company funds that appears to show several irregularities during Ms. Wilson's illness." Daniel jumped to his feet. "This is a mistake, Becca. We were only trying to help you. By selling my lake house? By liquidating the downtown properties? By discussing how to divide my assets while I sat in the next room?" My voice remained calm, but I could feel years of built-up strength returning to it. "I heard everything, Daniel. I saw the transfers you've already started making to offshore accounts." Jennifer began to cry, always her strategy when confronted. "You don't understand how stressful this has been for us, taking care of you, trying to keep everything going." "Taking care of me?" I laughed without humor. "Maya has been documenting how often each of you actually spent time with me. Would you like to see her logs? The average was less than 10 minutes per day from any of you. And as for keeping everything going, you've been systematically preparing to dismantle everything I built." I turned to face Edward, who had remained suspiciously quiet. "And you, Uncle Edward. I've seen the plans you sent to developers for my mountain property. 60 luxury vacation rentals, without a single conversation with me." The notary, who had been silently observing, stepped forward at Laura's nod. "All new documents have been properly executed and recorded. The previous documents signed today are nullified as they conflict with prior legal arrangements." "You can't do this," Daniel said, his voice now desperate. "We're family." "Yes, we are," I agreed, meeting his eyes steadily. "Which is why the betrayal cuts so deep." I moved back to my wheelchair, not because I needed it now, but to rest from the exertion of standing so long. "The new arrangements take effect immediately. Daniel, Jennifer, you'll find your company access has already been revoked. Uncle Edward, your board position has been terminated." "You're throwing us out?" Jennifer asked incredulously. "No," I replied. "I'm reclaiming what's mine. You all have 24 hours to remove your personal belongings from any of my properties. The company credit cards you've been using have been canceled. The financial audit begins tomorrow morning." Gregory, who had remained silent throughout, stood up. "Let's go, Jennifer. There's nothing more to discuss here." At least he recognized a losing battle when he saw one. One by one, they left the dining room. Daniel was the last to go, pausing at the doorway. "You'll regret this, Becca. You need us more than you know." I smiled sadly. I needed a family who loved me, Daniel. Instead, I got valuable lessons in trust and self-reliance. I'll be fine. After they left, Laura squeezed my shoulder. That went exactly as planned. Not exactly, I admitted. I hoped until the very end that one of them might show some remorse, some recognition of what they'd tried to do. People rarely admit wrongdoing when caught, Laura said wisely. What matters is that you protected yourself. That evening, alone in my lake house for the first time in months, I wheeled myself out onto the deck and watched the sunset reflect on the water. The property had been in my family for generations, passing to me after my parents' death. It held memories of childhood summers, family gatherings, moments of joy and connection. Now those memories were tinged with the knowledge of betrayal. My phone chimed with a text from Rachel. "All security codes changed. New staff starts tomorrow. How are you feeling?" I considered the question carefully. How was I feeling? Sad? Certainly. Angry? Yes. But also strangely liberated. For years, I had carried my family through their financial troubles, created positions for them, supported their lifestyles. In return, they had seen me as nothing more than a means to wealth, an obstacle to be managed when I became inconvenient. "I'm feeling stronger," I replied to Rachel. And it was true, in every sense of the word. Over the next 6 months, my physical recovery progressed steadily. With intense physical therapy and determination, I graduated from the wheelchair to a walker, then to a cane, and finally to walking unassisted. The doctors called it remarkable progress. I called it necessity. The family I had lost was replaced by people who genuinely supported me. Rachel, who returned as my executive assistant and proved herself worthy of the new role I created for her as operations director. Maya, who continued as my personal health advocate. Laura, whose legal expertise expanded to help me restructure my business. They weren't related to me by blood, but they showed me what true loyalty looked like. As for Daniel, Jennifer, and Uncle Edward, the financial audit revealed more than I had imagined. Daniel had been siphoning company funds for years, covering his tracks with creative accounting. Jennifer had been charging the company for design. Work never completed. Edward had been using company resources for his personal investments. I could have pressed charges. Laura certainly encouraged it. But in the end, I chose a different path. I sent each of them a final settlement agreement, repayment plans for what they had taken, signed confessions that would be filed if they defaulted, and complete separation from my life and business. They all signed without negotiation. 1 year. After that fateful meeting at the lake house, I stood at the podium at the Seattle Business Leaders Gala, accepting an award for corporate resilience. My company had not only survived, but thrived under the new management structure. I had completed my physical recovery and returned to full-time work. The story of my illness remained private, known only to those closest to me. Resilience isn't just about surviving difficult times, I told the audience during my acceptance speech. It's about emerging stronger, wiser, and more authentic. Sometimes the challenges we face come from unexpected sources, even from those we believed would always stand by us. The true test isn't whether we avoid being knocked down, but how we choose to stand up again. After the ceremony, as I mingled with colleagues and friends, I received a text from an unknown number. "Congratulations. You deserved better from us. I'm sorry. D." I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, should remain ashes. But I did feel a small measure of peace, knowing that at least one person from my former life recognized the truth. That night, back at my lake house, I sat on the deck with a glass of wine, looking out at the water just as I had the night my family left. But now, Instead of uncertainty, I felt purpose. Instead of betrayal, I felt gratitude for the clarity it had brought me. My illness had taken much from me, but it had also given me invaluable gifts: the knowledge of who truly stood by me, the strength to stand on my own, and the wisdom to build a life filled with people who valued me for who I was, not what I owned. As the stars reflected on the lake's surface, I raised my glass in a silent toast to unexpected journeys and the power of a secret will. Not just the legal document that had protected my assets, but the inner determination that had saved me from those who thought my vulnerability made me weak. They had divided my assets in their minds, planned their future with what I had built. What they hadn't known was that my greatest asset had always been within me. The resilience they had, gravely underestimated. When I first founded Horizon Properties at the age of 19, my father warned me that real estate was a cutthroat business. "Trust your instincts, Becca," he'd said. "Numbers don't lie, but people often do." I remembered those words as I watched Daniel's expensive sedan pull out of my driveway the morning after our confrontation. The family I thought I knew was gone, replaced by strangers wearing familiar faces. The ache of betrayal lingered, but alongside it grew something unexpected, a steely determination I hadn't felt since those early days of building my company from nothing. Growing up in the Wilson family meant growing up in the shadow of expectations. My father, Richard Wilson, had built a modest construction company into a regional powerhouse through sheer will and countless 16-hour days. My mother, Elizabeth, managed the books with precision while raising 3 children. We weren't wealthy like the families in the gated communities where we often worked, but we were comfortable. And more importantly, we were taught the value of hard work and integrity. Daniel, being the oldest and only son, was groomed to take over the family business from an early age. Jennifer, the middle child and beauty of the family, was encouraged in her artistic pursuits with the understanding that she would eventually marry well. And then there was me, Rebecca, the youngest, the afterthought, the one who was supposed to get a sensible degree and perhaps teach or work in administration somewhere. When our parents died, father from a heart attack at 58, mother from cancer just 8 months later, the family dynamics shifted dramatically. Daniel took control of Wilson Construction as expected, but within 3 years the company was struggling. Jennifer married Gregory Hayes, an ambitious real estate agent from a good family, but with more charm than business sense. And I, the one no one had expectations for, dropped out of college and used my modest inheritance to purchase and renovate a foreclosed condo. That first property turned a profit that seemed miraculous to my siblings. The second and third projects confirmed it wasn't luck, but strategy and an innate understanding of the market. By 25, I had a small but growing portfolio. By 30, Horizon Properties was competing with established development firms for prime Seattle real estate. And by 35, I was the most successful Wilson by every measure, a fact that my brother and sister never quite came to terms with. I hired Daniel after his third failed business venture, partly out of familial obligation and partly because, despite his flaws, he had our father's charisma and connections. Jennifer's interior design business became our exclusive staging partner, bringing her prestige clients and steady income. I even created a board position for Uncle Edward, our father's only brother, who had always been on the periphery of successful ventures without quite achieving success himself. Looking back, I can see that what I thought was family loyalty was actually creating the perfect storm. I had surrounded myself with people who resented my success even as they benefited from it. People who saw what I built not as the result of my vision and hard work, but as a family asset to which they were entitled. People who, when my health failed, saw opportunity rather than responsibility. The week after the confrontation passed in a blur of legal meetings and medical appointments, Laura Chen proved herself invaluable, deftly managing the transition of company control from Daniel to the interim management team we had assembled in secret. Rachel oversaw security changes at all my properties and supervised the removal of my siblings' remaining personal items. Maya continued my physical therapy with renewed dedication, pushing me harder now that we no longer needed to hide my progress. 10 more steps, Becca, Maya urged as I gripped the parallel bars in my sunroom-turned gym, sweat dripping down my temples. Your quadriceps are getting stronger every day. I gritted my teeth and forced my legs to move, one painful step after another. The Guillain-Barré had affected my peripheral nervous system, leaving my muscles weak and coordination impaired. Recovery meant retraining my body through sheer repetition and will. I need to be back on my feet completely within 3 months, I told her, collapsing into my wheelchair after completing the exercise. Maya handed me a towel and water bottle. That's an aggressive timeline. Your doctors... My doctors don't understand what's at stake, I interrupted. Daniel won't go quietly. He's already retained Martin Blackwell. Blackwell was one of Seattle's most aggressive litigators, known for scorched earth tactics in business disputes. What can he possibly sue for? You've documented everything. I took a long drink of water. It's not about winning in court. It's about creating enough doubt and chaos to pressure me into a settlement. He'll claim I was mentally incompetent. When I created the new trust, he'll allege that Laura coerced me. He'll demand a psychological evaluation. Maya's expression darkened. That's despicable. That's business, I replied, though the words tasted bitter. And family. Sometimes I'm not sure which is worse. My prediction proved accurate. The following week, a formal letter arrived from Blackwell's firm, alleging that Daniel, Jennifer, and Edward had acted solely in my best interest during my illness and demanding reinstatement of their positions. It further claimed that my sudden recovery raised questions about whether I had been exaggerating my condition to entrap my family members in some sort of elaborate scheme. Laura scoffed when I forwarded her the letter. This is desperate. We have documented medical records, daily nursing reports, and video documentation of your therapy progression, not to mention the offshore accounts they were establishing. It's not about facts, I said. It's about perception. If they can create enough doubt about my mental state or my motives, they can pressure me into a settlement just to avoid the public spectacle. Then we counter with our own pressure, Laura replied. I've completed the preliminary financial audit. Do you want to see the results? The audit report made for sobering reading. Daniel had been systematically transferring company funds to a shell corporation registered in his name for at least 2 years before my illness. Small amounts at first, then increasingly larger sums as my condition worsened. Jennifer had been billing Horizon for design services on properties we didn't own, with the payments diverted to a joint account held with Gregory. Uncle Edward had used his board position to access proprietary information about planned developments, which he had then sold to competitors. All told, they had embezzled nearly $7 million. And that was just what we could document from preliminary investigation. This is enough for criminal charges, Laura noted quietly after giving me time to absorb the information. I set the report down and wheeled myself to the window overlooking the lake. The water was choppy today, white-capped waves driven by a stiff wind. It matched my internal state perfectly. I never thought they'd go this far, I said finally. Taking advantage of my illness is one thing, but this started long before I got sick. People rarely start with major betrayals, Laura observed. They test boundaries, justify small transgressions, and gradually escalate when there are no consequences. I turned back to face her. What do you recommend? Legally speaking, file criminal charges? The evidence is unambiguous. They committed fraud and embezzlement. And they go to prison, I said flatly. Laura nodded. Most likely, yes. Daniel certainly would, given the extent and duration of his activities. I closed my eyes, suddenly, exhausted beyond measure. The family Christmas dinners, the summer barbecues at this very lake house, the way Daniel had carried me on his shoulders when I was small. All those memories collided with the cold reality of betrayal documented in the report on my desk. "I need time to think," I told her. That night, I couldn't sleep. I transferred myself from my wheelchair to the window seat in my bedroom and watched the moonlight play across the water. The lake house had been in our family for 3 generations, purchased by my grandfather when this area was still considered remote from Seattle. My earliest memories were formed here, learning to swim off the private dock, helping my mother plant the garden that still bloomed each spring, listening to my father's stories on the deck as the sun set. How had we gone from those simple, connected moments to this tangle of resentment, greed, and betrayal? Was it money that changed us? Success? Ambition? Or had the seeds always been there, dormant until circumstance provided fertile ground? Around 3 a.m, I made my decision. I wouldn't file criminal charges, not yet. Instead, I would confront each of them individually, away from the lawyers and accusations. I needed to look into their eyes and understand why, even if their reasons could never justify their actions. I started with Jennifer, arranging to meet her at a small cafe in Bellevue, neutral territory far from either of our homes. She arrived 15 minutes late, her designer sunglasses failing to hide her red-rimmed eyes and the strain around her mouth. She'd lost weight, I noticed, her normally immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. "Thank you for meeting me," I said as she slid into the booth across from me. I had graduated to using a cane, and it leaned against the table between us like a physical manifestation of the barrier between us. "Your lawyer said it was important," she replied, her voice cool. "Is this about the settlement offer? Because Gregory thinks we should be countersuing for defamation." I ignored the provocation. "The audit is complete, Jen. I know about the fake design invoices. I know about the account you and Gregory set up. I know everything." Her face paled, but she rallied quickly. "Those invoices were for legitimate work. If there was any confusion about billing—" "Stop," I interrupted quietly. "We're beyond that now. The evidence is overwhelming. I'm not here to debate whether it happened. I'm here to understand why." Jennifer stared at me for a long moment, then suddenly deflated, her defensive posture collapsing like a punctured balloon. "You don't know what it's been like," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Living in your shadow all these years. The brilliant Rebecca Wilson, business prodigy, self-made millionaire before 30. Do you know what people say? Jennifer's the sister of that amazing property developer. Never just Jennifer, always defined by you. So you stole from me?" I asked, genuinely trying to understand the logic. "How does that solve anything?" "It wasn't like that at first," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. "It was just taking advantage of opportunities, billing a few extra hours here and there. Then Gregory's real estate business started struggling, and we had the mortgage on the Mercer Island house, and the country club dues." She trailed off, perhaps hearing how hollow the justification sounded. "And when I got sick?" Jennifer looked away. "Daniel said you probably wouldn't recover fully, that the doctors were just being optimistic with you. He said we needed to secure our futures before things changed." "Before I died, you mean?" I said flatly. She flinched. "He didn't put it that bluntly, but yes, essentially." "And you believed him? Without talking to my doctors yourself? Without asking me directly? You were so weak, Becca. You could barely feed yourself those first few weeks. And Daniel had the medical power of attorney. He showed us documents, prognosis reports, falsified reports," I corrected. "My neurologist never said my condition was terminal or permanently disabling. Quite the opposite." Jennifer's eyes widened. "Daniel lied," I cut in, feeling a surge of anger. "And you chose to believe him because it was convenient, because it justified what you were already doing." She had no response to that, her gaze dropping to the untouched coffee between her hands. "Here's what happens now," I continued after a moment. "You have two options. Option 1, I file criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement. The evidence is clear, and you would likely face prison time, as would Gregory for his role in the scheme." Jennifer's head snapped up, real fear in her eyes now. "Prison? Becca, you can't be serious. We're family." "Family doesn't steal from each other," I replied, unmoved. "Family doesn't plan to sell off someone's home while they're fighting to recover from a debilitating illness." "What's option 2? She asked in a small voice. I slid a folder across the table. "Full restitution of every dollar taken, with interest. A signed confession that will be held in escrow, filed only if you ever attempt something similar again. And complete separation from me, my company, and my assets. No contact, no claims, no involvement whatsoever." She opened the folder with trembling hands, scanning the documents inside. "This would ruin us financially. The Mercer Island house, our investments." "You should have thought of that before stealing from me," I said, rising from my seat and taking my cane. "You have 48 hours to decide. After that, I file charges." I left her sitting there, staring at the papers that documented her betrayal in cold, hard numbers. There was no satisfaction in it, only a deep sadness for what our relationship had become. My meeting with Uncle Edward 2 days later was briefer and far less emotional. We met at his club, an old money establishment in downtown Seattle, where he had been a member for decades, despite never quite having the financial status to belong there comfortably. "I expected this would happen eventually," he said, after I presented him with the same options I'd given Jennifer. "You always were the sharp one, Rebecca. Just like your father." "Don't," I warned. "Don't pretend this is about family legacy or shared traits. You sold proprietary information to our competitors. You betrayed not just me, but everything my father built and stood for." Edward had the grace to look ashamed briefly. Richard would have understood. He knew business was business. "My father fired his best friend of 20 years when he caught him skimming from the company," I reminded him. "Do you really think he would have understood his brother selling secrets to competitors?" That silenced him. He signed the restitution agreement without further argument, his once confident signature now shaky and diminished. As I watched him walk away, shoulders stooped, I felt nothing but hollow vindication. Another piece of my past excised like a tumor, necessary but painful. Daniel was the last and most difficult confrontation. He refused to meet on neutral ground, insisting instead that if I wanted to talk, I should come to his office. Technically, my office, though he still occupied the CEO suite at Horizon headquarters. It was a power play, forcing me to enter what had been my domain as if I were the visitor. But I decided to allow him that small illusion of control. The Horizon Properties building in downtown Seattle was my vision realized in glass and steel. 15 stories of innovative, sustainable design that had won architectural awards and established our reputation as forward-thinking developers. I had personally selected everything from the lobby's granite flooring to the living wall of native plants that purified the air and reduced energy costs. Walking through those doors again after months of absence felt surreal. The security guard's eyes widened in recognition, then quickly smoothed into professional neutrality. The receptionist actually gasped when she saw me, half rising from her chair before uncertainty froze her in an awkward crouch. "Ms. Wilson, we didn't. That is, Mr. Wilson didn't mention you were coming in today." "It's all right, Meredith," I assured her. "I have a meeting with my brother. He's expecting me." The elevator ride to the top floor gave me time to center myself. I was dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that helped mask the weight I'd lost during my illness. My hair was styled professionally, makeup applied with care to bring color back to my face. The cane was the only visible sign of what I'd been through, and I held it more like an accessory than a necessity. determined to project strength. Daniel's assistant, a new hire I didn't recognize, announced me with obvious discomfort. "Sir, your sister is here." "Send her in," Daniel's voice called from within. My brother's office had changed in my absence. The minimalist design I preferred had been replaced with heavy, traditional furniture. A massive desk, leather chairs, dark wood bookshelves. It looked like the set of a TV show about powerful executives, which was precisely the image Daniel had always aspired to project. He didn't stand when I entered. Another small power play. "You're looking better than expected," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Though the cane is a nice touch. Generates sympathy, I imagine." I remained standing. "The cane is because I'm still rebuilding muscle mass after 3 months of limited mobility, as you well know." He shrugged, leaning back in his chair. "What do you want, Becca? Your lawyer made it clear we're to communicate only through legal channels." I wanted to look you in the eye when I asked why. I said simply, "Why the embezzlement, the lies about my prognosis, the attempt to steal what I spent my life building? Why, Daniel?" Something flickered across his face. Anger, shame, defiance, or some combination of all three. "You wouldn't understand. You've never understood what it's like to fail, to lose, to be second best." "Actually, I understand perfectly," I countered. "I was always the afterthought in this family. Too young to matter, too female to be taken. Seriously. The difference is I didn't use that as an excuse to steal from the people who loved me." "Loved you?" he scoffed. "You employed us. You controlled us. You doled out positions and permissions like a queen granting favors to her subjects. Don't pretend this was about family." The accusation stung more than I wanted to admit. "I gave you opportunities when no one else would. After you ran Dad's company into the ground, after the failed restaurant venture, after the tech startup that collapsed. I was there every time, Daniel. With a job, with capital, with connections." "Charity," he spat. "Your charity. Never letting me forget who was in charge, who had the real power." I stared at him, truly seeing him perhaps for the first time. The resentment that had festered for years, the sense of entitlement that twisted his perception, the desperate need to prove himself that had corroded his integrity. It was all so clear now. "I never saw it as charity," I said quietly. "I saw it as family. I thought we were building something together." "We were building your empire," he corrected bitterly. "The Rebecca Wilson success story. The rest of us were just supporting characters." I set the folder containing the audit results and restitution agreement on his desk. "You have the same choice as Jennifer and Edward. Full restitution and separation, or criminal charges. They've both already signed." Daniel didn't even glance at the folder. "Of course they did. They're weak. I'm not." "This isn't about strength, Daniel. It's about consequences. You stole nearly $2 million from the company. You lied to the board. You tried to liquidate assets without authorization. Those are crimes, not business disputes." "Go ahead then," he challenged. "File charges. Drag the Wilson name through every newspaper and business journal in the Pacific Northwest. See how your precious company values hold up when potential partners learn the founder's brother is facing prison for fraud." "Do you think I haven't considered that?" I asked. "Do you think I want this to be our legacy, but you've left me no choice?" He stood then, coming around the desk to face me directly. Despite everything, I had to force myself not to step back. This was still my big brother, the one who had taught me to ride a bike, who had threatened my first boyfriend with bodily harm if he ever hurt me. "There's always a choice, Becca," he said, his voice softening slightly. "We can end this now. Reasonable settlement, mutual non-disparagement agreement. Everyone saves face. I keep running operations. You retain ownership and final approval on major decisions. Isn't that better than destroying everything we've both worked for?" For a brief moment, I wavered. The path he offered would certainly be easier. No legal battles, no public exposure, no permanent severing of family ties. But then I remembered the documents in his own handwriting planning my removal from the company, the falsified medical reports, the offshore accounts established while I fought to make my legs work again. "No," I said firmly. "That's not going to happen. You have 48 hours to decide. Restitution and separation, or criminal charges. Those are the only options on the table." His expression hardened again. "Then I'll see you in court." I nodded once, turned, and walked out of the office that had once been mine, past the employees who watched with curious eyes, through the lobby of the building I had designed, and into the bright Seattle afternoon. My hands were steady as I called Laura from the car. "Daniel's not going to sign," I told her. "Prepare the filing." True to his word, Daniel fought. Over the next month, he waged a multi-front war. Legal motions to dispute the audit findings, a PR campaign painting himself as the loyal son protecting the family business from an unstable sister, attempts to rally board members and investors to his side. But the evidence was too overwhelming, his position too compromised. When the Seattle Business Journal ran a front-page story detailing the financial irregularities at Horizon Properties, complete with documentation of Daniel's embezzlement, the last pillars of his resistance crumbled. His attorney called Laura to negotiate surrender terms. 2 days later, Daniel signed the same restitution agreement as Jennifer and Edward, his signature an angry scrawl across the page. He emptied his office that same afternoon, leaving behind only a framed photo of our parents that had hung on the wall. A week after that, I received the first of what would eventually become 3 heartfelt apologies. It came from Jennifer, a handwritten letter expressing genuine remorse for her actions and the pain she had caused. She explained but didn't excuse her behavior, acknowledging the harm she had done to our relationship. "I don't expect forgiveness," she wrote, "but I want you to know that I understand now what I destroyed, and I will regret it for the rest of my life." Edward's apology came next, more formal but equally sincere. He returned several family heirlooms he had taken from the lake house. During my illness, items of more sentimental than monetary value that I hadn't even realized were missing. Daniel never apologized directly. Instead, 6 months later, I received notice from my attorney that he had paid his restitution in full, 3 months ahead of the agreed schedule. Included with the final payment was a business plan for a small construction company he was starting in Portland, Oregon, specializing in affordable housing developments. There was no note, no request for funding or connections, just the plan itself, solid, innovative, and unlike anything he had attempted before. It felt like a message of sorts, or perhaps a promise to himself more than to me. I did not respond, but I did have Rachel monitor the company's progress from a distance. When they completed their first successful project a year later, I sent an anonymous donation to the community center that was part of the development. Some ties, it seemed, could not be entirely severed, even when broken beyond repair. The physical recovery from Guillain-Barré syndrome is typically measured in months, sometimes years. My doctors were amazed at my progress, from wheelchair to walking unassisted in less than a year, regaining not just mobility, but strength and endurance as well. Remarkable determination, they called it. Unprecedented recovery rate. What they didn't understand was that my physical rehabilitation was inextricably linked to my emotional healing. Every painful step without the wheelchair, every hour of exercise that left me trembling with exhaustion, every small victory over the disease that had temporarily confined me. Each was also a step away from victimhood, from the vulnerability that had been exploited by those I trusted most. By the time I resumed my full duties as CEO of Horizon Properties, 18 months after that fateful meeting at the lake house, I was stronger in every way than I had been before my illness. The company had not just survived, but thrived under the interim management team, emerging from the scandal surrounding Daniel's actions with a renewed commitment to transparency and ethical leadership. The lake house remained my sanctuary, though I had it completely remodeled. New furniture, new colors, new layout. Only the exterior and the views remained the same. I needed to reclaim it without the constant reminders of betrayal in every room. One evening, as I stood on the deck watching the sunset reflect on the water, my phone chimed with an incoming text. It was from Rachel. "Just saw the news. Gregory Hayes filed for bankruptcy. Jennifer listed as co-debtor. Thought you should know." I started to type a response, then stopped, deleting the half-formed message. There was nothing to say, really. No satisfaction to be gained from their misfortune. No vindication I hadn't already achieved. They had made their choices, just as I had made mine. The consequences for all of us were still unfolding. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and returned my gaze to the darkening water. A family of ducks glided by, the mother leading. Ducklings following in perfect formation. Family. Such a simple word for such a complex reality. The family I was born into had fractured beyond repair, the trust between us severed by greed and resentment. But family, I had learned, could be created as well as inherited. Rachel, who had stood by me through the worst crisis of my life. Maya, who had pushed me to recover when I thought it impossible. Laura, whose integrity and wisdom had helped me navigate the darkest days. Even the new team at Horizon, bound together not by blood, but by shared values and purpose. These were the people who had proven themselves in adversity, who had chosen loyalty when it was difficult rather than convenient. These were the people who had helped me rebuild not just my health and my company, but my faith in human connection. As the last light faded from the sky, I made a decision. The following day, I would establish a foundation, funded by the restitution, payments from my family, dedicated to supporting patients with Guillain-Barré syndrome and similar conditions. It would provide financial assistance for medical costs, home modifications, and therapy services. It would transform the pain of betrayal into something healing and hopeful. I would name it the Second Chance Foundation, because sometimes the most powerful response to those who tried to take everything from you is to create something new and meaningful from the experience, to demonstrate that vulnerability, properly protected, can become a source of strength rather than weakness. The ducks disappeared into the gathering darkness, but I remained on the deck, feeling the cool evening air against my skin, grateful for the simple ability to stand unassisted, to breathe deeply, to look forward rather than back. I had lost a family and found a deeper understanding of what truly mattered. I had been betrayed and discovered my own resilience. I had been sick, and in that sickness, found a strength I never knew I possessed. The lake reflected stars now, pinpricks of light in the vast darkness. I reached for my phone again and opened a new message to Rachel. "Schedule a meeting with Laura tomorrow. Time to create something new." The Second Chance Foundation became my unexpected salvation. 2 years after my illness, what began as a personal project had blossomed into a respected nonprofit with 3 full-time staff and partnerships with major medical centers across the Pacific Northwest. We provided financial assistance to patients with autoimmune disorders, specialized equipment not covered by insurance, and support for families navigating the complex medical system. The work gave purpose to my experience, transforming personal trauma into collective healing. On a rainy Tuesday morning, I sat across from Dr. Eliza Kimura, the neurologist who had diagnosed my Guillain-Barré syndrome and guided my treatment. Now she served on the Foundation's Medical Advisory Board, helping identify patients who could benefit from our programs. "The Mitchell case is complicated," she said, sliding a file across my desk. "Single mother, 3 children, diagnosed with CIDP, chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy. Similar to your condition but progressive. Her insurance is fighting the IVIG treatments, claiming they're experimental." I scanned the file quickly. Tara Mitchell, 34, elementary school teacher. Symptoms began 6 months ago with numbness in her extremities, progressing to difficulty walking. Currently on unpaid medical leave. Children ages 8, 6, and 3. Approve the treatment. Funding immediately, I said, and arrange for home modifications and childcare assistance. What's her prognosis? With proper treatment, good. But there's a significant recovery period and she'll need ongoing maintenance therapy. I nodded, making notes. Have Rachel arrange a video call with her. I want to speak with her personally about the Foundation's mentor program. Already thinking of recruiting her? Dr. Kimura asked with a small smile. Eventually. People who've lived through these conditions bring invaluable perspective. But for now, she needs to focus on healing and her children. Dr. Kimura gathered her papers. You've built something remarkable here, Rebecca. When we first discussed your recovery goals, I never imagined this would be the outcome. I thought back to those early conversations in the hospital, when walking again seemed like an impossible dream. Neither did I, but sometimes our greatest challenges reveal purposes we couldn't have imagined. After Dr. Kimura left, I remained at my desk, staring out at the Seattle skyline obscured by rain. The city lights blurred through the water-streaked windows, creating an impressionist painting of urban life. I had an Empire Board meeting at 2, a conference call with East Coast investors at 4, and dinner with the mayor's economic development team at 7. But in this moment of quiet, my thoughts drifted to the path that had led me here. The lawsuit Daniel had threatened never materialized. Instead, he had retreated to Portland, using his portion of the restitution payment to start Wilson Urban Development, a small but growing company specializing in affordable housing. His name occasionally appeared in industry publications, usually associated with innovative building practices or community-focused projects. We hadn't spoken since the day he emptied his office at Horizon, but through business channels, I kept tabs on his progress. He seemed to have found his own way, separate from my shadow. Jennifer and Gregory's story took a different turn. The bankruptcy Rachel had mentioned was just the beginning of their troubles. After losing their Mercer Island home and Gregory's real estate license, suspended for ethical violations unrelated to their dealings with me, they relocated to Phoenix. Jennifer occasionally sent cards, birthday, Christmas, even a congratulatory note when the Second Chance Foundation received a major grant. I never responded, but I didn't return them either. They accumulated in a drawer in my home office, markers of a relationship that existed now only in memory. Uncle Edward passed away from a sudden heart attack 6 months after our confrontation. His funeral was small, attended mostly by old business associates and golf partners. I sent flowers but did not attend. His widow, Aunt Patricia, with whom I'd never been close, sold their Queen Anne Hill home and moved to Florida. Another branch of the family tree pruned away by circumstance and choice. The lake house remained my sanctuary, though I now shared it with a rotating cast of foundation patients during their recovery. The property's peaceful setting and accessibility made it ideal for short-term rehabilitation stays. I maintained a private wing for myself, but the main house had been reconfigured with wider doorways, accessible bathrooms, and therapeutic equipment. The dock where I had learned to swim now featured a wheelchair-accessible ramp and a specially designed lift for water therapy. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my reflections. "Mr. Takahashi is in the lobby," Rachel's voice announced. "You're 11 o'clock. "Send him up," I replied, straightening in my chair and shifting mental gears. Kenji Takahashi was the CEO of Pacific Rim Investments, one of the largest development companies in Asia. They were exploring a partnership with Horizon Properties for a major mixed-use project on Seattle's waterfront. The meeting wasn't just about business. It represented something deeper, the full circle of my professional resurrection. "Ms. Wilson," Takahashi said as he entered, bowing slightly before extending his hand. Thank you for making time in your schedule. The pleasure is mine, Mr. Takahashi. I rose to greet him without using my desk for support, a small victory I still savored. Though my recovery was considered complete by medical standards, my body remembered its betrayal. On rainy days like today, a phantom tingling sometimes returned. To my extremities, a ghost of the paralysis that had once claimed them. We spent the next hour discussing architectural renderings, sustainability goals, and community integration for the proposed development. Takahashi was particularly interested in the foundation's involvement. Your model of incorporating adaptive spaces and rehabilitation facilities directly into commercial developments is innovative, he observed. We've seen nothing like it in Tokyo or Singapore. Inclusive design benefits everyone, I explained. When we create spaces that work for people with mobility challenges, we create better spaces for all users, parents with strollers, elderly residents, delivery services. And integrated rehabilitation facilities bring specialized services directly into the community. And it differentiates your properties in the market, he noted with shrewd appreciation. I smiled. Good ethics can also be good business, Mr. Takahashi. After he left, promising to send a formal partnership proposal within the week, I found myself thinking about the transformation of Horizon Properties. What had begun as a traditional development company had evolved into something more purposeful. Every new project now incorporated elements of accessibility, sustainability, and community service. We had become known for buildings that worked better for more people, that lasted longer, that gave back to their surroundings. This evolution hadn't happened overnight. After the confrontation with my family and my return to leadership, Horizon had faced challenges. The scandal of Daniel's financial improprieties had shaken investor confidence. Some board members questioned whether I was physically capable of resuming full duties. Competitors spread rumors about instability within the company. Rather than hiding from these challenges, I had addressed them directly. I held a press conference where I acknowledged the financial irregularities discovered during my illness, presented the steps taken to resolve them, and outlined a new vision for the company focused on transparency and social responsibility. I didn't name Daniel or detail the family betrayal. Those wounds were private. But I made it clear that the company had emerged stronger and more ethically grounded. The board initially resisted some aspects of this new direction, particularly the allocation of space in commercial properties for rehabilitation services and the higher costs associated with universal design principles. But as the first projects demonstrated both social impact and strong financial returns, skepticism gave way to support. By 3 o'clock, I was seated at the head of the conference table in Horizon's main boardroom, leading the quarterly Empire board meeting. Looking around at the faces of my executive team, some who had been with me since the early days, others recruited after the restructuring, I felt a surge of gratitude. These were people who had stood by the company through crisis, who believed in the vision, who brought their talents to building something meaningful. The Pacific Rim Partnership looks promising, I concluded after updating them on the morning meeting. Their resources combined with our approach to integrated design could transform the waterfront project from merely profitable to truly groundbreaking. Their timeline is aggressive, noted Omar Patel, our Chief Operations Officer. Can we meet it with our current workforce? That brings me to our next agenda item, I replied. I'm proposing we establish an in-house training program focused on specialized construction skills, adaptive architecture, smart home integration for mobility challenges, therapeutic environment design. We'll partner with community colleges and trade schools to create a pipeline of trained workers. This addresses our staffing needs while also creating career opportunities in underserved communities. The discussion that followed was vigorous, with healthy debate about implementation challenges and resource allocation. This was another change from the pre-illness days, when my executive team had often functioned more as an audience than active, participants. Now, I deliberately fostered constructive disagreement, believing that the best ideas emerged from the collision of diverse perspectives. By the time we adjourned, we had approved the training program concept and assigned a team to develop a detailed implementation plan. As the executives filed out, Vanessa Coleman, our new CFO, lingered behind. "Rebecca, do you have a minute?" she asked. I gestured for her to stay. Vanessa had joined Horizon 6 months after Daniel's departure, bringing financial expertise from her previous role at a major tech company. She was brilliant, meticulous, and unflinchingly honest. Exactly what the company needed after Daniel's deceptions. "The quarterly financials look strong," she began. "But there's something I wanted to discuss privately." She slid a tablet across the table. "I've been monitoring Wilson Urban Development as you requested. They're bidding on the Portland Affordable Housing contract." I scanned the information on the screen. It was a major municipal project, the kind that could establish Daniel's company as a serious contender in the Pacific Northwest development community. "According to my sources," Vanessa continued, "they're struggling to meet the capital requirements for a bid of this size. Without additional investment or a partnership with a larger firm, they won't qualify." I leaned back in my chair, processing this information. And Horizon would qualify easily. Yes, we could submit a competing bid and almost certainly win it. Or we could offer a partnership, I finished for her. Vanessa nodded. "It's your call. From a purely business perspective, the project aligns with our community development goals. The partnership would be justifiable to the board, but given the history..." I stared out the window at the Seattle skyline, thinking, the history. Such a simple phrase for such a complex reality. In the 3 years since my illness, I had rebuilt my health, my company, and my sense of purpose. I had created the foundation, developed new business models, forged relationships based on shared values rather than family obligation. I had moved forward in every way except one. I had never addressed the broken family relationships that lay at the heart of everything. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention," I told Vanessa. "Let me think about it." That evening, after my dinner with the mayor's economic development team, I returned to the lake house rather than my downtown condo. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the world washed clean and gleaming under a rising moon. I kicked off my shoes at the door and padded barefoot through the quiet house to the deck overlooking the water. The lake was still tonight, a perfect mirror reflecting the moon and stars. I settled into a lounge chair, wrapped a throw blanket around my shoulders against the evening chill, and allowed myself to really think about Daniel for the first time in years. My brother. My betrayer. My earliest protector turned greatest threat. The complexity of our relationship defied simple categorization. He had taught me to ride a bike and later tried to steal my company. He had stood up to playground bullies on my behalf and then become a different kind of bully himself. He had been both brother and enemy, family and stranger. What would it mean to offer him a partnership now? Was it weakness to extend a hand to someone who had tried to push me off a cliff? Or was it strength to recognize that people can change? That second chances might be warranted for those who demonstrate genuine growth? I pulled out my phone and opened the browser, searching for news about Wilson Urban Development. The company's website featured several completed projects, small but impressive affordable housing developments in Portland's rapidly gentrifying neighborhoods. The designs were innovative, emphasizing community spaces and environmental sustainability. The About page included a simple mission statement: creating homes that restore dignity and build community. There was no mention of Horizon Properties or the Wilson family connection, no attempt to leverage our shared last name or history. Daniel had built something new from the ground up, defined by his own vision rather than in relation to me or my success. On impulse, I navigated to the contact page and found a general inquiry form. Before I could overthink it, I typed a brief message. Interested in discussing potential partnership for the Portland Municipal Housing Project. Rebecca Wilson, Horizon Properties. I hit send before I could change my mind, then set the phone aside, staring out at the moonlit water. Whatever came of this, rejection, cautious acceptance, or silence, I had taken a step that would have been unimaginable 3 years ago. I had offered a possibility of reconnection, however limited and professionally defined. My phone chimed with an incoming email notification much sooner than I expected. I picked it up, my heart inexplicably racing, and opened the message. Available for discussion. My office or yours. Daniel Wilson. 6 words. Neutral? Neither. Warm nor cold. Professional. Appropriate. A door neither flung open nor slammed shut, but merely left ajar, allowing for the possibility of stepping through. I typed a reply. Neutral ground might be best. Coffee at Westlake Center, Thursday, 10 a.m.? His response came quickly. Confirmed. See you then. I set the phone down and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Thursday. 2 days. Away. A meeting that might mean nothing or everything, depending on what we each brought to it and what we were willing to receive. The following day passed in a blur of foundation work and horizon business. I mentioned the potential Portland project to the executive team, but not the proposed meeting with Daniel. That remained private. A personal decision rather than a corporate one, though the lines between the two had always been blurred in my life. Wednesday evening, I found myself standing in my closet, deliberating over what to wear to meet my brother, an absurd concern that somehow felt monumentally important. Too formal would suggest distance, too casual might imply a familiarity we no longer shared. I finally settled on a navy pantsuit with a simple white blouse, professional but not intimidating, appropriate for a business meeting that wasn't quite just business. Thursday morning dawned clear and cold, a perfect Seattle autumn day. I arrived at the coffee shop 20 minutes early, choosing a table near the back with a view of the entrance. I ordered a cappuccino and opened my tablet, pretending to work while actually watching the door. Daniel arrived precisely at 10, punctuality being one trait we had both inherited from our father. He looked different than I remembered, leaner, his dark hair now liberally streaked with gray at the temples, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. He wore a charcoal suit with no tie and carried a worn leather messenger bag rather than the expensive briefcase he had favored in his Horizon days. He spotted me immediately, nodded once, and ordered at the counter before making his way to my table. I noted that he remembered my drink preference when he set a fresh cappuccino in front of me alongside his black coffee. "You look well," he said as he sat down, his voice neutral but not cold. "Thank you. So do you." An awkward pause followed, 3 years of silence creating a chasm neither of us quite knew how to bridge. Daniel took a sip of his coffee, then set the cup down with deliberate care. "I was surprised to get your message. I assumed Horizon would submit a competing bid." "We considered it," I acknowledged, "but the project aligns with both our companies' missions. A partnership could make sense from a business perspective." "And from a personal perspective?" he asked, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. I took a breath, weighing my words carefully. "I'm not sure. That's more complicated." He nodded, accepting this truth. "Fair enough. Let's start with the business then." For the next hour, we discussed the Portland project in detail, the financing challenges, design requirements, community engagement strategies. Daniel was clearly passionate about the work, describing innovative approaches to creating affordable housing that fostered dignity and connection rather than the institutional feel of many low-income developments. "We incorporate community gardens, shared workspaces, childcare facilities," he explained. "The goal is to create ecosystems, not just housing units. People need places to live, but they also need places to belong." I found myself genuinely impressed by his vision and the thoughtfulness behind it. This wasn't the Daniel I had known at Horizon, the one focused primarily on status and financial metrics. This was someone who had developed a deeper understanding of the human impact of development work. "What changed?" I asked during a pause in the conversation. He didn't pretend to misunderstand the question. "Everything," he said simply. Losing. The position at Horizon, facing the consequences of what I'd done. It forced a reckoning. I had to ask myself who I wanted to be if I couldn't be the successful Caldwell executive anymore. And I remembered why I got into construction and development in the first place, back when I was working summers for Dad. It was about building something tangible, creating spaces where life happens. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that. I nodded, understanding completely. The business became about the business rather than what the business does. Exactly. He hesitated, then added quietly, "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Becca. What I did to you was unforgivable. But I am trying to build something worthwhile now." The frankness of this statement caught me off guard. There was no manipulation in it, no attempt to minimize or justify past actions. Just a simple acknowledgement of reality and a statement of present intention. "I believe you," I said after a moment, surprising myself with the truth of it. "The work you're doing with Wilson Urban speaks for itself." Relief flickered across his face, quickly contained. "Thank you. That means more than you might think." We spent another half-hour discussing the potential parameters of a partnership. Horizon would provide capital and broader development expertise, while Wilson Urban would lead the design process and community engagement. The arrangement would be project-specific, with clear terms and exit provisions, professional rather than personal. As we prepared to leave, Daniel hesitated. "There's something else you should know, if we're going to work together in any capacity." "What's that?" "I'm in recovery, 2 years sober." He said it matter-of-factly, without drama or expectation. I blinked, genuinely surprised. Daniel had always been a social drinker, but I had never considered his alcohol consumption problematic. I didn't realize. Few people did. I was functional, careful to maintain appearances. But it was a factor in my decision-making during that time. Not an excuse, he added quickly. Just a reality I've had to face. This disclosure shifted something in my understanding of the past, adding a layer of complexity to events I had thought I fully comprehended. It didn't change what had happened or erase the betrayal, but it provided context I hadn't previously considered. "Thank you for telling me," I said simply. He nodded, gathering his things. "I'll have my team draft a preliminary partnership proposal and send it over by Monday." "I'll look forward to it." We walked together to the exit, the conversation, shifting to safer territory, industry news, the challenges of the current market, mutual acquaintances in the development world. At the door, we paused, the moment of parting suddenly awkward again. "It was good to see you, Becca," Daniel said finally, extending his hand. I looked at the offered hand, remembering all the history between us, childhood games and adult betrayals, shared grief and separate journeys, blood ties and broken trust. Then I reached out and clasped it firmly. "It was good to see you too, Daniel." We parted ways on the sidewalk, heading in opposite directions. I walked back to the Horizon offices slowly, processing the unexpected emotional complexity of the meeting. It wasn't reconciliation exactly. The damage done was too extensive for that, the trust too thoroughly broken. But it was something. An acknowledgement of shared humanity. A willingness to see the present person rather than just the past actions. A small opening where before there had been only a wall. Back at my office, I found Rachel waiting with a stack of correspondence requiring my attention. "How did it go?" she asked, curiosity evident in her voice. As my assistant since before the illness, she was one of the few people who knew the full story of the family betrayal and understood the significance of the meeting. Better than expected? I replied thoughtfully. Different than expected. They changed. Do you trust him? The question was direct, practical, concerned with my well-being rather than abstract possibilities of family healing. I considered carefully before answering. Not entirely, not yet. Maybe not ever in the way I once did, but enough to explore a limited business partnership with appropriate safeguards? Yes, I think so. Rachel nodded, accepting this measured response. The Foundation Gala Committee is waiting in the conference room whenever you're ready. I glanced at my watch, surprised to see that the meeting with Daniel had taken longer than planned. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes. Alone for a moment, I stood at my office window, looking out at the city spread below. Seattle had been my home all my life, the backdrop to every chapter of my story. Childhood, education, career, illness, recovery. Its skyline had changed dramatically over the decades, new buildings rising, old ones repurposed or replaced. Change was inevitable, in cities as in people. The question was whether that change created something better, more functional, more meaningful than what came before. I thought of Daniel's company mission statement, creating homes that restore dignity and build community. Simple words that reflected a profound shift in priorities and perspective. People could change. They could learn from their worst mistakes, reimagine their values, rebuild with greater purpose. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya, now the Foundation's Rehabilitation Program Director. Tara Mitchell completing first full IVIG treatment. Responding well, thought you'd want to know. I smiled, picturing the young mother we were helping, imagining her children welcoming her home with improved strength, the long recovery journey ahead but with support now in place. One story among many the Foundation had touched, lives altered, not by grand gestures but by practical assistance offered at crucial moments. This was the unexpected gift of my illness and betrayal, a clearer vision of what mattered, what I wanted to build with the remaining chapters of my life. Not just properties and profits, but possibilities. Not just buildings, but belonging. Not just success, but significance. I gathered my notes for the Gala Committee meeting, feeling a sense of alignment between all aspects of my work now. Horizon's development projects, the Foundation's support programs, even the tentative partnership with Daniel's company. Different expressions of the same underlying purpose, creating spaces, literal and figurative, where people could heal, connect, and thrive. As I headed to the conference room, I realized I was genuinely looking forward to planning the Foundation's annual fundraising event. 3 years ago, such social obligations had felt like necessary performance, part of the business persona I had carefully constructed. Now, they were opportunities to advance work I deeply believed in, to invite others into a vision larger than profit margins or personal success. This, perhaps, was the most profound recovery of all, not just of physical capability or professional standing, but of purpose and meaning. In trying to take everything from me, my family had inadvertently set me on a path to discovering what truly mattered, what was worth building and protecting and sharing. I paused at the conference room door, taking a moment to appreciate the journey from that wheelchair at the lake house to this moment of integrated purpose. Then I straightened my shoulders, opened the door, and stepped forward into the next chapter of the story I was still writing. A story no longer defined by illness or betrayal, but by the strength and wisdom those challenges had ultimately revealed. The partnership with Daniel's company began cautiously. Our legal teams crafted an agreement with more safeguards than a nuclear facility. Clear boundaries, transparent reporting requirements, independent oversight of all financial transactions. We approached each other like professional acquaintances rather than siblings who had once shared bunk beds and childhood secrets. In meetings, we were unfailingly polite, focused entirely on the Portland housing project, never venturing into personal territory. When others were present, we referred to each other formally. Ms. Wilson believes, And Mr. Wilson suggests, maintaining the fiction that our shared surname was merely coincidental. 6 months into the collaboration, the project was progressing smoothly. The design phase was complete, permits secured, and construction had begun on the first phase of what would eventually become a 100-unit affordable housing complex with integrated community spaces. I visited the site monthly, touring the construction with Daniel while keeping a professional distance. On a crisp October morning, I arrived for my regular site visit to find Daniel waiting with 2 hard hats and coffee in paper cups. Mine, still a cappuccino, a detail he continued to remember. "We've got something interesting to show you today," he said, handing me the coffee and protective gear. "The community kitchen foundation is being poured, and we've incorporated some design elements I think you'll appreciate." As we walked through the partially constructed buildings, I was struck by how seamlessly the project integrated accessibility features: wider doorways, barrier-free entrances, adaptable cabinetry, without making these elements feel institutional or separate from the overall design. "The units are universal design," Daniel explained as we entered a framed-out apartment. "Every space is accessible, but not in a way that screams disability accommodation. It's just good design that works for everyone." "This is impressive," I acknowledged. "It's exactly the approach we've been implementing at Horizon, but you've taken it even further in some ways." A flicker of pride crossed his face. "We've been studying your recent projects. The Rainier Avenue development particularly, the way you integrated the rehabilitation clinic with the residential spaces, was brilliant." The unexpected compliment created a momentary bridge between our professional facades. For a brief instant, we were just 2 people who understood and appreciated each other's work. "Thank you," I said simply. We continued the tour, discussing technical details and construction timelines. As we approached the community garden area, Daniel hesitated, then spoke in a different tone. "I've been meaning to tell you, I've been following the Foundation's work. The mentorship program for families dealing with autoimmune disorders. It's making a real difference." This personal observation caught me off guard. "How did you know about the mentorship program?" "I make anonymous donations," he admitted. "I receive the updates." I stopped walking, processing this information. The Second Chance Foundation received thousands of donations annually, many from anonymous sources. The idea that Daniel had been quietly supporting this deeply personal project of mine, without credit, without using it to curry favor, shifted something in my understanding of who he was now. "Why?" I asked directly. He looked away, watching the construction workers preparing forms for the concrete pour. "Because what happened to you was wrong. Not just what I did, but the illness itself. And because the foundation is doing important work." He paused. "And maybe because it was a way to support you without intruding into your life." The honesty of this statement hung in the air between us. For the first time since our coffee meeting months earlier, we were acknowledging the complex reality beneath our carefully constructed professional relationship. "Thank you," I said finally. "The foundation means a lot to me." He nodded, and we resumed walking, the moment of personal connection allowed to pass without further exploration. But something had changed, a small crack appearing in the wall separating our past from our present. That evening, back at the lake house, I sat on the deck with a glass of wine, replaying the interaction in my mind. Daniel's anonymous donations to the foundation represented something I hadn't anticipated, a desire to make amends that didn't demand recognition or forgiveness. It was a form of restitution freely given, without strings or expectations. My phone chimed with a text from Rachel. "Governor's office called. They want you to speak at the Healthcare Accessibility Summit next month. Opportunity to highlight the foundation's work." I typed back a quick confirmation, then set the phone aside, still thinking about Daniel. Over the past 6 months, I had observed him carefully during our professional interactions. He was different from the brother who had betrayed me during my illness. More grounded, more focused on impact rather than image, more willing to credit others' contributions. The changes seemed genuine rather than strategic, a true evolution, rather than a performance designed to regain access to what he had lost. Could people really change so fundamentally? The question had larger implications than just my relationship with Daniel. It touched on my entire worldview, my understanding of human nature and potential. If I believed that transformation was possible, that people could learn from their worst mistakes and become better versions of themselves, then I had to allow for that possibility in my brother. Not with blind trust, but with cautious recognition of the evidence before me. 2 weeks later, an unexpected situation forced us to navigate more personal territory. I was scheduled to attend the Portland Project's community engagement event, an open house where future residents and neighborhood members could view plans, ask questions, and provide input. The night before, I developed a high fever and severe body aches. Nothing like my previous illness, just a common flu, but enough to make travel impossible. Rachel suggested canceling, but the event was too important to the project's community relations strategy. Instead, I arranged to participate virtually, addressing attendees via video conference during the opening presentation. Daniel would have to take the lead on site. As I prepared for the video call from my bedroom, wrapped in a blanket and fortified with tea and medication, I felt a twinge of vulnerability. This was the first time since my recovery that illness had prevented me from fulfilling a professional obligation. Though the situations were entirely different, the experience triggered echoes of that earlier helplessness. Daniel called me directly just before the event began. "How are you feeling?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. "I've been better," I admitted, "but I'll manage for the presentation. We've got everything set up here. The main points are covered in your slides, and I can field questions afterward. Just focus on getting through your part, then rest." The care in his tone, practical rather than pitying, eased my anxiety. "Thanks, Daniel." The presentation went smoothly, with me appearing on a large screen to welcome attendees and outline the project's vision. I kept my remarks brief, then handed off to Daniel, who managed the rest of the event with unexpected grace. Through the video feed, I watched him interact with community members, listening carefully to concerns, explaining design choices without defensiveness, adapting to feedback in real time. When he called me afterward, his voice was energized. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Several families pre-registered for the application process, and the neighborhood association officially endorsed the project. "That's fantastic," I said, genuinely pleased despite my physical discomfort. "You handled it beautifully." "I learned from the best," he replied, then hesitated. "How are you doing, really? Do you need anything?" The question awakened complicated emotions. During my Guillain-Barré recovery, Daniel had never once asked what I needed. He had seen my illness as an opportunity to take control of my assets, not as a human being requiring support. This simple inquiry now, offered without agenda or obligation, highlighted how profoundly he had changed. "I'm okay," I assured him. "Just a standard flu. My assistant stocked me with everything I need." "Good. Get some rest. I'll send you the full feedback report tomorrow." After we hung up, I lay back against my pillows, considering the unexpectedly personal interaction. Our carefully maintained professional boundaries had softened, allowing glimpses of genuine concern and connection. It felt both strange and familiar. Strange because it contrasted so sharply with our recent formality. Familiar because it echoed the sibling relationship we had once taken for granted. The following week, when I returned to Portland for a rescheduled site visit, something had shifted in our dynamic. The conversation flowed more naturally, occasionally venturing beyond strictly business topics into areas of shared interest. Industry trends, books we'd read, even cautious mentions of mutual acquaintances. We still avoided direct references to the past or to other family members, but the rigid wall between personal and professional had developed permeable sections. As winter approached, bringing Seattle's characteristic gray skies and persistent drizzle, the Portland project reached an important milestone: completion of the first building's exterior, allowing interior work to continue regardless of weather. To mark the occasion, Daniel's company organized a small ceremony for the construction team, project partners, and community representatives. It wasn't a major event, just an informal gathering with refreshments and brief remarks, but it represented a significant step toward the project's realization. I arrived early, wanting to tour the building before others arrived. The transformation from architectural renderings to physical structure was always satisfying. The abstract becoming concrete, vision becoming reality. As I walked through the partially finished common areas, I was impressed by the attention to detail, the thoughtful integration of accessibility features, the emphasis on creating spaces that fostered connection. "What do you think?" Daniel asked, joining me in what would become the community kitchen and gathering space. "It's exceptional," I replied honestly. "The quality of work, the design execution, it exceeds expectations." "That matters to me," he said quietly. "Not just meeting the requirements, but creating something genuinely worthwhile." "I can see that." I ran my hand along a countertop installed at a height accessible to wheelchair users. "This project will change lives. That's the goal." He glanced at his watch. "People will be arriving soon. Do you want to finish the tour?" We walked through the remaining spaces, the laundry facilities designed for universal access, the children's playroom with adaptable features, the tech center where residents could access computers and internet services. Throughout, I noticed how the design balanced practicality with dignity, creating spaces that were functional without feeling institutional. As we concluded the tour, Daniel hesitated at the building's entrance. "There's something I've been wanting to discuss with you away from the offices and formal meetings." My guard instantly rose, a reflexive response to years of caution. "What is it?" "I've been approached about a similar project in Seattle, another affordable housing development with a focus on accommodating residents with mobility challenges. The developers heard about our work here and reached out specifically to Wilson Urban." "That's excellent," I said, genuinely pleased for him. "Your expertise is being recognized." "The thing is," he continued carefully, "the project is in the Rainier Valley area, where Horizon already has significant presence. I wanted to discuss it with you directly before responding, to make sure it wouldn't create conflict." This consideration, this willingness to prioritize our working relationship over a business opportunity, was another indication of how much had changed. The old Daniel would have pursued the project regardless of potential conflicts, perhaps even seeing them as advantages. "I appreciate you bringing this to me," I said. "I don't see any immediate conflict with our current developments, but let me review the specifics before you commit. If it's something that makes sense for both our companies, we could potentially collaborate again." Relief crossed his face. "That would be my preference. The Portland partnership has been good for the project and professionally." I nodded, understanding the unspoken acknowledgement that our careful collaboration had value beyond the business outcomes, that we had found a way to work together that honored both our shared history and our separate journeys. "It's been good. For me, too," I admitted. Before we could explore this territory further, the first guests began arriving. Community representatives, project partners, members of Daniel's team. The moment for personal conversation passed as we shifted into our professional roles, welcoming attendees and guiding them through the new building. During the brief ceremony, I stood slightly apart, observing Daniel as he thanked the construction teams and acknowledged project partners. He spoke with genuine passion about the building's purpose, not just providing housing, but creating community, supporting dignity, enabling independence. This wasn't the brother who had pursued status and financial gain at any cost. This was someone who had found authentic purpose in his work. After the formal remarks, as people mingled and explored the building, a woman in a wheelchair approached me. She wore a Seattle Community Housing Authority badge identifying her as Elena Ramirez, resident advocate. Ms. Wilson, I wanted to thank you personally for your company's involvement in this project. The attention to accessibility details exceeds anything I've seen in affordable housing. The credit belongs to Wilson Urban Development, I replied. They led the design process. Yes, but I understand Horizon Properties brought crucial support and expertise. She glanced toward Daniel, who was speaking with a group of construction workers across the room. It's remarkable what you two have accomplished together. The phrase caught me off guard. You two, as if Daniel and I were still a unit, still family in some meaningful way. We share a commitment to inclusive design, I said carefully. And more than that, I think, Elena observed with surprising insight. Forgive me for being personal, but I've worked in community development for 30 years. I recognize when a project has heart behind it, when it's more than just concrete and contracts. She smiled warmly. Whatever brought you two together on this project, I'm grateful for it. The families who will live here deserve this level of care and consideration. As she moved away to join another conversation, I found myself reflecting on her words. This project did have heart behind it, born from both Daniel's evolving vision and my own experience of physical vulnerability. Our separate journeys had converged here, creating something neither of us could have accomplished alone. Later, as the AEI event wound down and most attendees had departed, Daniel approached me with 2 cups of coffee from the catering service. Thought you might need this. These events always drain me. I accepted the coffee with a smile of recognition. The introvert's burden. Everyone thinks development is about buildings, but it's really about relationships. Exactly. He leaned against the wall beside me, both of us taking a moment of quiet amidst the day's activities. I met Elena Ramirez earlier, impressive advocate. She spoke with me too. She's grateful for what we've created here. Daniel nodded, looking out over the now nearly empty community room. Sometimes I wonder what Dad would think of all this. The mention of our father, the first direct reference to our shared family, history since our confrontation years ago, created a momentary tension. We had carefully avoided such topics, keeping our interactions safely in the present. But now the door had been cracked open. After a brief hesitation, I decided to step through it. I think he'd be proud of this, I said quietly. Not the business. Success, though, that would matter to him. But creating something with genuine social impact, that would mean more. You think so? Daniel's question held a vulnerability I hadn't heard from him in decades. I always felt he was disappointed in me, even before the company struggles, like I never quite measured up. This honest admission caught me by surprise. Dad was hard. On you, I acknowledged. He had specific expectations for his only son, but he was also deeply proud of you. He told me once that you had a vision he lacked, the ability to see possibilities beyond the immediate. Daniel looked at me with surprise. He never said anything like that to me. He wasn't good at expressing those things directly, especially not to you. I think because he saw himself in you, and all his own perceived failings. We stood in silence for a moment, both processing this unexpected venture into our shared past. It's strange, Daniel said finally. For years, after what happened during your illness, I couldn't think about Dad without shame. Like I'd betrayed not just you, but everything he built, everything he taught us. He met my gaze directly. I did, of course, betray those things. But now, with this work, I sometimes feel like I'm finding my way back to what originally mattered. The honesty of this statement deserved equal honesty in return. I see that, I told him. In everything about this project, in how you approach the work now, it's genuine. Relief crossed his face at this acknowledgement. Thank you. That means more coming from you than from anyone. The conversation had ventured into emotionally complex territory, further than we had gone before. I felt simultaneously connected to my brother and protective of my hard-won boundaries, a contradiction that reflected the complicated reality of healing from betrayal, while acknowledging genuine change. We should head back, I said finally. I have a foundation board meeting tomorrow morning. Daniel nodded, accepting the gentle closing of the conversation. I'll have the updated timeline for the next construction phase sent over by Friday. We walked to our separate cars, the moment of personal connection completed for now, but not erased or denied. It existed alongside our professional relationship, neither diminishing nor overwhelming it. On the drive back to Seattle, I found myself thinking about my father, a complicated man whose approval had shaped both Daniel's and my life choices in different ways. Richard Wilson had built his construction company through relentless work and uncompromising standards. He loved his children, but struggled to express that love, except through achievement and success. Daniel, as the son and heir apparent, had borne the weight of those expectations most directly. Had that pressure contributed to the choices Daniel made later? The desperate need to succeed at any cost, to maintain status and control, to never show vulnerability? It didn't excuse his betrayal during my illness, but it offered context that helped me understand it differently. Understanding, however, wasn't the same as forgetting. The tentative reconnection with Daniel existed within clear boundaries, focused primarily on shared professional goals rather than familial reconciliation. The trust that had been shattered could never be fully restored. Too much had happened. Too many lines crossed. But perhaps something new could be built in its place. Not the unquestioning sibling bond of our childhood, but a more conscious relationship based on who we had become rather than who we had been. The Seattle skyline appeared through the rain-spattered windshield, familiar towers illuminated against the early evening darkness. This city had witnessed my greatest successes and most devastating losses. It had seen me build Horizon Properties, from a fledgling company to an industry leader, then fight to reclaim it from family betrayal. It had watched me recover from physical paralysis and create the Second Chance Foundation from that experience. Now it was witnessing another kind of recovery, the cautious rebuilding of a relationship I had believed permanently destroyed. The outcome remained uncertain, the process delicate and sometimes painful. But the simple fact that such rebuilding was possible at all represented a kind of healing I hadn't thought to seek. The following morning, I led the foundation board meeting with renewed energy, presenting proposals for expanding our support programs to include entire families affected by neurological conditions, not just the patients themselves. The experience of illness rippled outward, touching spouses, children, parents, friends. Healing should do the same. We need to think systemically, I told the board members gathered around the conference table. When someone faces a condition like Guillain-Barré or MS or ALS, the entire family ecosystem is affected. Our support should reflect that reality. Dr. Kimura, still a key advisor to the foundation, nodded in agreement. The medical system focuses on the patient, often leaving families to navigate the broader impacts alone. Addressing those gaps would be innovative and tremendously valuable. The board approved the concept unanimously, authorizing development of specific programs and budget allocations. As the meeting concluded, Dr. Kimura lingered behind. "You seem particularly energized today," she observed. "The Portland project going well?" "Very well," I confirmed. "The first building is taking shape beautifully." She studied me thoughtfully. "And the partnership with your brother? How is that evolving?" I considered the question carefully. Dr. Kimura was one of the few people who knew the full story of my family's betrayal during my illness. She had witnessed my physical recovery and supported the emotional healing that followed. "It's progressing," I said finally, cautiously, with clear boundaries. "That sounds healthy," she replied. "Healing doesn't always mean returning to what was before. Sometimes it means creating something new that acknowledges both the wound and the growth that came after." Her words crystallized something I had been feeling but couldn't quite articulate. The relationship forming with Daniel wasn't a restoration of our former sibling bond. It was something different, more conscious, more limited in some ways, but perhaps more authentic in others. "We had a conversation yesterday about our father," I told her. "The first time we've really acknowledged our shared past since everything happened." "That's significant," she noted. "How did it feel?" "Strange, painful, but also clarifying. Like seeing a familiar landscape from a different elevation, noticing patterns that weren't visible before." She smiled with understanding. "The perspective that comes with distance and time. It's one of the gifts of surviving difficult experiences, the ability to see connections and contexts that were obscured when we were in the middle of them." Later that day, I received an email from Daniel with the updated construction timeline attached. The professional communication included a brief personal postscript. "Thank you for the conversation yesterday. It meant a lot to hear your perspective about Dad." I hesitated before responding, weighing the implications of acknowledging this more personal exchange. Finally, I typed a simple reply. "It was good to talk about him. Some memories are easier to carry when shared." This small interaction, professional, communication with a careful personal addendum, seemed to establish a new pattern in our evolving relationship. We maintained our primary focus on the project that had brought us back into each other's orbits, while allowing measured acknowledgments of the complex history and family bonds that remained despite everything that had happened. As winter deepened and the year drew to a close, this pattern continued. Our project meetings retained their professional structure, but occasionally included brief personal exchanges, a question about health, a comment about a shared memory, small recognitions of the connection that existed alongside our business relationship. In December, as the first snowfall dusted Seattle, I received a formal invitation to the Portland Project's community naming ceremony, scheduled for early January. The residents' committee had selected a name for the development, and the event would unveil it alongside updates on construction progress and move-in timelines. The invitation arrived with a handwritten note from Daniel. "Your foundation's mentorship program has inspired the community spaces in the second building. Would value your input on the implemented designs if you can attend." I confirmed my attendance, feeling a complex mixture of professional satisfaction and personal uncertainty. The Portland Project had become more than just a business venture. It represented a bridge between past and present, between broken trust and cautious rebuilding, between who we had been and who we were becoming. As I prepared for the Foundation's year-end board meeting, reviewing program outcomes and setting goals for the coming year, I found myself reflecting on the unexpected journey of the past several months. The decision to reach out to Daniel about a potential partnership had been primarily strategic, a business opportunity that aligned with Horizon's values and goals. I hadn't anticipated that it would open the door to something more complex, a carefully bounded reconnection with the brother whose betrayal had once seemed unforgivable. Forgiveness, I was learning, wasn't a single act or decision. It was a process that unfolded gradually, shaped by new actions and demonstrated change over time. It didn't erase the past or remove all consequences, but it created space for something different to emerge, something that honored the reality of both the harm done and the growth that followed. The Portland Project would be completed in the coming year. The partnership with Daniel's company eventually concluded. What would remain between us after that professional connection ended remained to be seen. But whatever happened, I had discovered something valuable in the process. The possibility of moving forward without being defined by past betrayals, of creating new meaning from even the most painful experiences. As snow continued to fall outside, my office window, I opened my calendar and began blocking time for the coming year's priorities: foundation programs, development projects, personal commitments to health and well-being. Among these entries, I added a new appointment: Coffee with Daniel, January 18th. It was a small step, a tentative extension beyond our strictly project-focused interactions. He might decline, or it might prove too uncomfortable to sustain. But after nearly 4 years of healing, physical, professional, emotional, I felt ready to explore whether the careful collaboration we had established could evolve into something more balanced, something that acknowledged both our shared history and our separate journeys forward. The snow fell more heavily now, transforming Seattle's familiar landscape into something new and unmarked. Tomorrow would bring decisions and challenges, negotiations and responsibilities. But for this moment, I allowed myself to appreciate the quiet beauty of transformation, how circumstances, relationships, and people could change in ways both unexpected and profound, creating possibilities where once there had seemed only endings. 5 years to the day after I discovered my family dividing my assets while I lay ill, I stood at the podium accepting Seattle Business Magazine's Lifetime Achievement Award. The irony wasn't lost on me. There had been a time when my lifetime seemed precarious, when my achievements were being dismantled by those closest to me. Now, at 47, I found myself addressing a ballroom filled with the city's business leaders, philanthropists, and changemakers. Resilience isn't about remaining unchanged by difficulty, I told the audience. It's about being transformed by it in ways that create greater purpose and meaning. From my position on stage, I could see the faces of those who had become my true family. Rachel, now Horizon's Chief Operating Officer. Maya, directing the Foundation's nationwide rehabilitation programs. Laura, still my trusted legal advisor and friend. In the middle of the room sat Tara Mitchell, that first Foundation recipient who had gone on to become our patient advocacy director, alongside the families we had supported through illness and recovery. And there, at a table near the back, sat Daniel. We had maintained our careful, bounded relationship in the years since the Portland project's completion. Monthly coffee meetings, occasional collaboration on community initiatives, a slow rebuilding of something that wasn't quite familial intimacy, but was more than mere professional acquaintance. He had brought his new wife, Caroline, a psychologist who specialized in addiction recovery, whom he had met in his continuing sobriety journey. Jennifer had not been invited. Our paths had crossed only once in the past 5 years, at Uncle Edward's widow's funeral. The encounter had been civil but distant, the bridge between us two, thoroughly burned for reconstruction. She and Gregory had divorced, and she had rebuilt a modest interior design practice in Phoenix. The Christmas cards still arrived each year, but they remained in that drawer, acknowledged but unanswered. The greatest challenge in business and in life, I continued in my speech, isn't achieving success. It's defining what success actually means. The Portland housing development, now known as Restoration Commons, had won national recognition for its innovative design and community impact. Dozens of families with mobility challenges had found not just accessible housing, but genuine community there. The project had become a model, replicated in 3 other cities, each implementation refined based on resident feedback and evolving best practices. For Horizon Properties, the partnership had opened new avenues of development, focused on integrated accessibility and community services. Our properties now routinely incorporated rehabilitation facilities, adaptive technology showcases, and universal design principles. What had begun as a personal response to my own experience had transformed into a corporate mission that differentiated us in the marketplace while creating genuine social impact. The Second Chance Foundation had grown beyond my initial vision, now operating in 7 states with programs addressing the full spectrum of needs facing those with autoimmune and neurological conditions, from immediate medical support to long-term rehabilitation, from family counseling to workplace accommodation advocacy. The mentorship program paired newly diagnosed patients with those further along in recovery, creating networks of understanding and practical support that the medical system alone couldn't provide. As I concluded my remarks and returned to my seat amid applause, I felt a profound sense of completion. Not because the work was finished, it would continue evolving long after this moment, but because the journey from that wheelchair in my lake house to this podium represented a cycle of destruction and creation, of betrayal and renewal, that had ultimately led to something more meaningful than what came before. Later, at the reception following the awards ceremony, Daniel approached with 2 glasses of sparkling water. "Congratulations," he said, handing me one. It was well-deserved. "Thank you." I accepted both the drink and the sentiment, noting how comfortable these exchanges had become over time, not erasing the past, but not defined by it either. "I wanted to let you know," he said after a moment. "Caroline and I are expecting a girl due in August." The news caught me by surprise, not just the pregnancy, but Daniel's decision to share it with me, to include me in this personal milestone. "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely meaning it. "Congratulations to you both." He hesitated, then added quietly, "We were thinking of naming her Elizabeth, after Mom, but I wanted to check with you first." The consideration in this gesture, this acknowledgement of our shared history and his awareness of how family remembrances might affect me, spoke volumes about how far we had come. "I think Mom would have loved that," I replied, finding the words came easier than expected. He nodded, relief evident in his expression. "The Portland team mentioned you're consulting on the Denver project. I'll be there next month for the planning sessions." "Yes, I'm scheduled to review the community space designs." "Perhaps we could have dinner while we're both there," he suggested. "Caroline would like to meet you properly, outside of events like this." I considered the invitation, another small extension beyond our carefully maintained boundaries. "I'd like that," I said finally. As Daniel moved away to greet other attendees, I found myself reflecting on the long, complicated journey that had led to this moment. The family that had betrayed me during my illness had irreparably fractured, the trust destroyed beyond full restoration. But from those broken pieces, something new had emerged. Not a replica of what was lost, but a mosaic created from fragments of the past combined with new elements formed in the aftermath. The secret will I had created during my illness had protected my assets, but the true legacy of that difficult time was something more valuable: the clarity to distinguish between genuine connection and mere obligation, the wisdom to build boundaries that protected without isolating, the courage to allow for transformation in others as well as myself. As I moved through the reception, accepting congratulations and discussing future projects, I carried with me the knowledge that true resilience isn't about withstanding change. It's about being changed in ways that reveal our deepest strengths and most authentic purpose. My family had tried to divide my assets when I was at my most vulnerable, never realizing that in doing so, they would ultimately help me discover my most valuable possession: the capacity to transform betrayal into blessing, limitation into purpose, ending into beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.